This one's for the podcast, but it's going on YouTube. So, all right, ready? I'm going to hit record.
All right.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. This is Dan Sfera. I've got Chris Sauber on the line. How's it going, Chris? Chris is doing good, I assume. He's still there. We also have...
I am here. I just now can hear you.
Okay, good. Really?
Yeah, there's a delay on my end.
Oh, okay. And we also have Brenda. Brenda, were you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. So we have Brenda. Brenda, for people who don't know, should we tell them, Brenda, or should we keep that on the down low?
Tell them. It depends on what you're trying to tell them.
There's a thing you do once every 3 months on Saturdays.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Brenda is one of our CRA Academy instructors. So some of you listening or watching may already know her, but she's also a CRA in her day job, right? So Chris actually had a really good idea yesterday, and I did a 10-minute video on the topic, but we want to dive deep into this and actually bring on a CRA because we were talking about CRAs and their impact on sites and whether sites get future studies or don't get future studies based on their interactions with the CRA. So welcome, Brenda. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you think so far? Or Chris, do you want to give some background first?
Well, when you say background, what do you mean specifically?
Well, what's the issue? Like, what is the actual question we're trying to answer here?
Okay, so let's just dive right in. So Brenda, does a sponsor ever come to you and say, "Hey, we're considering this site, and we know you've worked with them before. Would you recommend them?" Does that ever happen?
CTMs have asked on behalf of the sponsor, I guess. So yes, they will ask you that if they've seen that you've worked with a site before, and they will ask if you recommend them. Sometimes they will do that. That's happened before.
Okay. And has the reverse happened where they say, "Hey, we're considering the site, but we see some information that would kind of make us concerned about working with them. Do you have any concerns about this site?"
Yeah, I've seen that happen, and that I've seen happen with when there's been safety concerns or PI oversight issues. I've seen that, or if a site is combative or something like that.
Combative?
Yeah, like you have a combative study coordinator or a PI, but I've also had a combative PI who has continued to be a PI. So it really just it depends, honestly.
And when you say combative, what do you mean? Because maybe I'm combative sometimes and other times I'm not. What do you mean by that?
Like yelling. I've had a PI like shout at me because I pointed out some concerns with his oversight.
Okay.
So in that case, I would assume that your CRA Brotherhood would like you to say, "Hey, we don't want to use this site. We don't want to utilize them," because, if you were going to work with a site that you'd never worked with before and they had a running situation of which the PI was yelling at CRAs, you would rather not work there, right?
Right. For that,
So I would assume when you're approached about this, you do tell them, yes, this site's very difficult to work with.
Absolutely. But the irony in that, the funny thing about that is this particular site, my manager came out to me because we have managers, our line managers usually come out and do your observational visits with you like every 6 months or so. And she came out with me to this site, and it was during this visit that this PI, he yelled at me, and my manager she actually said, because she used to be a CRA, and she said, I had this site 10 years ago, and he was just the same way. So,
Wow.
So that's what I say. And then she worked for Icon at the time too.
Who is it? There's only a few people watching. Who do you know who this is?
No, well, it's a Dallas site. It was.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a Dallas. And
Okay.
so
I don't know
the
them.
thing about it is he's still working on studies for the CRO. So
Wow.
you know, obviously that didn't make a really big difference. You know, sometimes I've seen sponsors. There's some PIs that are untouchable.
Is he
for
like?
sponsors.
Yeah.
And-
Speaking of those, on like, would that be like considered a key opinion leader or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like those guys, they are usually, a lot of them can be very arrogant and cocky because they know they're untouchable, and they get away with.
So he has somewhat of a shield because of his opinions on the drug or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and he has a lot of patience. He supplies a lot of patients for the studies. Yeah, good, the things like
So he's
that.
very successful. So what the sponsor is looking for far above everything else, that's getting patients and getting them quickly. He provides that.
Exactly. So they can overlook certain things.
Right.
So you have to be. That's when that whole thing comes in. We want CRAs who can work well with people and work well under pressure and solve problems. There you go. That's the problem you're going to have to solve.
Was he affiliated with a university or just a private research clinic?
He's a private research clinic, but he had multiple sites.
Okay.
So if he didn't perform as well and he wasn't an opinion leader, most likely he wouldn't be awarded future trials with Icon.
Most likely, if he didn't hold any, he most likely wouldn't. Because I had another site that with a combative study coordinator, and we lost a lot of CRAs because of, they had to keep rotating and changing CRAs because they wouldn't go back. And I believe after that study, we didn't use that site anymore. So it really depends on that, the PI.
Okay. And I'm just curious,
I
was just gonna say, what kind of oversight issues did you point out to this PI that he got so irate about?
I was looking at, I saw an SAE that had occurred that wasn't reported on time, and he wasn't following up on SAEs, which to me, and every CRA, to me, that's a considerable PI oversight issue. But he was saying that basically what he told me was, I'm just the PI. So if the patient has an issue, I refer them to their primary care physician, and that's it. I don't need to do anything else. And I said, that's not right.
Wow.
When they have an SAE, you have to follow up on the SAE. And that's when he got mad and he said, what is oversight? You give me a definition of what oversight is. I want to see it because everybody has a different opinion and a different definition. And I almost left, because it was just, wow. And then he apologized eventually at the end for his outburst, but it was very uncomfortable.
Well, I bet.
Yeah. So something like that, I would think that should be important to a sponsor, if a PI has an attitude like that. But this is something that, they're not going to tell you this, but some things are more important. And if we can resolve that issue, okay, we found it, let's resolve it, write a CAPA, it's done. Okay, we've done our part.
CAPA, corrective action plan? That's what that is?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So how often do you think the sponsor looks at CRA reports? Do they look at every report?
To be honest, I don't think so. I don't think so, because reason I say that, because I'm gonna be honest, I have had reports where maybe I didn't have enough time, because CRA, sometimes we are on the road a lot, and sometimes some reports, they don't give you enough time, so the quality of that report is not going to be as great. And that's because you don't have enough time, and they push this metrics thing on you so hard. So it's like, okay, well, I got to meet my metric. I don't have enough time. I'm going to submit the report as is. And if it gets approved like that, I sometimes in my head, I'm like, if they're actually reviewing this report, somebody's going to say something about something. But I've never had, ever in my whole life as a CRA, had anything come back from the sponsor about even in mistakes that I knew I made or I caught, and I told the CTM, oh, I made a mistake here. It's never come back. The only time that they will, if you have a site that you're having problems with, and then, or something happens, and then they'll go, I know they definitely pull the reports then to see what happened and if you reported it and if it's something that they should have been made aware
of. Okay, so same line of questioning, but in regards to CROs. So your clinical trial manager, right? They look at every report?
Yeah. Yes. They do. Whoever.
And you...
If they're a reviewer, they will.
Okay. And do you think CROs track sites that they want to work with and don't want to work with?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I had a CTM.
So you don't necessarily... When it comes to the CRA reports, what I'm gathering is you don't necessarily believe sponsors track it so much, but the CROs do.
Yeah, I do. I believe the CROs track it more than the sponsor does, to be honest, because they have a job that they're getting paid to do, and they want to make sure that they're covered if something happens. The sponsor, I don't think no, not as much. I don't think so. I believe they hired the CRO to catch things that they are supposed to catch.
Right, and that's specifically why the sponsor has hired the CRO, so they can be the ones to watch these things and take care of it, manage the sites and everything else.
Yeah, although with the new GCP revisions in 2016, the FDA is putting much more of that responsibility back on the sponsors now. So you might see that change going forward, unfortunately, from what I hear.
Okay.
So sponsors may pay more attention to CRA reporting and things of that nature?
Yeah, they're basically like the PI. The way the FDA sees it is, the sponsor used to put everything on the CRO, just like the PI puts everything on the coordinator. And the FDA says, hey, we're holding the PI fully responsible for their site, and we're holding the sponsor fully responsible for the conduct of the study, not the CRO. That's basically what the 2016 GCP update said. I guess that's the cliff notes. There were a couple other things there, but that's one of the big ones.
Okay.
But as long as you're not a key opinion leader...
Overall,
go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was just going to say, Brenda, so overall, how important do you think a good relationship with the CRA is for future studies? For a site acquiring future studies, do you think it's important they have a good... And try and step back from being a CRA yourself. Utilize the knowledge you have, but don't think in terms of, because I wouldn't want to work there. With the question I'm leading towards here. Do you think the CRAs have any real impact on sites and getting future trials with any given CRO or sponsor?
I do.
A lot, a little?
I wouldn't say a lot. I would say maybe between a little and kind of in the middle, something like that. Because I think it all depends a lot on that CRA, and also the CTMs. You're forgetting that they have a lot of power in that too. Because they're the ones who directly communicate with the sponsor. They're the ones who have the meetings with the sponsors. There was a CRA, a CTM. This was couple weeks ago, she used to be my CTM, and a colleague of mine, she called me. She was having problems with this CTM, but they had a site that was a problem site, and this site was very rude, and the PI was just very unresponsive, and he said something rude to the CTM. And when she asked for some information, and she got livid. And I know the CTM because she's like a firecracker. I don't even like working with her. And she basically said he doesn't know who he's working with, who he's dealing with, because I'll have him pulled from this study. So the CTMs do have a lot of pull just because of the relationship that they have with the sponsor. They are closely interfaced with the sponsor. So what we carry and we take to the CTM takes to the sponsor. So it would depend on those relationships. The relationship that CRA has with that CTM, and then it goes up from there. They have a lot of power.
So as you move up the totem pole, it becomes more important from a business development side at the site that you have a good relationship with that individual or company. So CRA important, CTM even more important, then of course CRO and sponsor. You want to seem like a pristine site.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And for the sites watching or listening, I was just gonna say CTM, that's clinical trial manager, but in some CROs it might be a project manager or a lead CRA, right? It's not always called a CTM.
It's not always right.
Okay.
Right.
So and that's important.
They have a lot of power.
Yeah,
when it comes to that, I think.
Thank you for sharing that, Brenda, because that's important to know. A lot of the sites, they don't really interact with the CTMs or the project managers because, they're primarily dealing with you guys, the CRAs. But those instances where they do interact with them, I guess that should be an opportunity for them to establish a good relationship with the CTM.
Right. Exactly. And it's go ahead.
No, go ahead and finish your thought. I was going to go off on a tangent.
No, I was going to say, so the most important thing, the CTMs, because they don't want work created for them too. So when a site is not entering data on time consistently, or they're being a problem site, that's a problem for the CTM. So they do escalate that because they don't want to deal with that site anymore, because all that comes down on them. When the sponsor puts heat on them when the sites aren't doing well. So it's important because maybe as a CRA, I can't just go to the sponsor and say, hey, I don't think we should use the site again. But if that site is consistently doing things or not doing what they're supposed to do, or causing problems with the CRA, and she's reporting to the CTM, they're going to escalate that because they get a lot of heat from the sponsor. So they don't want that. They don't want to deal with it again.
Okay, that's a good segue into my tangent here.
Okay.
So aside from enrollment, because enrollment is the most important aspect of research, right? Get the patients in, get qualified patients in. So outside of that, what do you think is the most important 1, 2, 3 things that a site can do in regards to dealing with a CRA, and just overall, what should they be doing to make sure that they are considered again for future trials?
I would say.
Is it timely data entry? What would you say?
Yeah, I was definitely timely data entry, query resolution, being responsive when they're contacted about cleaning up data or whatever, any queries. What else?
What about recruitment?
Definitely recruitment.
I said aside from recruitment.
Oh, okay.
That's obviously the number one topic. Aside from recruitment or enrollment.
Yeah, so that's what I would say. It's the data, because quality of data is that's the big thing. So a site that's responsive when we're trying to close queries or asking questions about data, that's very important. So if you can do that as a site, every CRA and CTM would love you.
On average?
Okay, so let me give you a hypothetical. Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, just real quick. On average, because you've monitored way more studies than I have, what, on average, for an average study, how many protocol deviations does one site per study commit? Like the average site?
Are you talking about the life of the study?
Yeah. Like, let's just take an average study, an average site. You know, how many protocol deviations is acceptable, and how many? I know it's all subjective. How many would it cause a second look from the CTM?
Oh, okay. So I'm assuming you're referring to deviations cause in site error.
Yeah.
Or oversight.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I don't know how, this is a hard question to give, but I would say on average, maybe, I would say in the 5 to 10 range.
Wow, per study, per site? That's a lot. Okay.
And I'm saying, because usually, like, when I have a deviation, it's like consenting issues. So if it's one problem with one patient, it falls into more than one patient.
Right,
so
right.
I'm adding those numbers.
Okay.
So it'll be repeated.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
Chris, you know why I'm asking, because we have that one study that's very good, and we're worried about our standing with the sponsor. So
Yeah.
I think we're okay.
Well, it's a cumulative effect too, because we've had a number of different errors, not necessarily protocol deviations, but there's been like 3 or 4 in and of themselves minor errors, but it's a cumulative effect, right, Brenda? I mean, you have 3 or 4 minor errors. Now, if you continue creating errors, even if they're somewhat minor, they kind of add up and make a bit large snowball, right?
Exactly. So if it's like little things.
A quick hypothetical, and I know you probably don't know this for certain, but let's just say a site really good at enrollment. They're exceeding what the sponsor or CRO would expect per site. Say they're expecting 5 patients enrolled for the study at each site. And the site's always, and they've worked with the same CRO or sponsor a number of times, and they're always getting double or triple the number of patients necessary or that they would like to see from each site. But the site is also awful to work with. You know, slow on entering data, lots of errors, all kinds of problems. Do you think that sponsors and CROs will continue to work with that site just because they provide patients quickly? And again, that's what they're looking for. Do you think they'll overlook all the other negatives because of that very strong positive?
I've seen it happen with top sponsors, and they give them gold medals when we have meetings, despite all that issue. Like, yeah, it's really frustrating because the CRAs are in the back, and we're like, what, really? Like, we send 4 and 5 CRAs to monitor at that site. All we find are issues, but we're at meetings and they're getting gold medals because they're a top enroller, getting pats on the back. It doesn't.
No, so you do know you absolutely know the answer to this question is for certain that they do overlook all the negatives if they have that very strong positive.
Yes, they will. Yeah, they do.
Wow.
They do.
Okay.
So the message, the motto here is become a key opinion leader, and you don't need to worry about almost anything.
Well, not necessarily a key opinion leader, just enroll a lot of patients.
Well, that's
enroll a lot of patients.
Yep. Be the top enroller.
They won't care about anything else. Be a top enroller.
Exactly. And they won't care. Unless you don't kill somebody. Like, you know. I think you're good.
And unless you can continue.
That's horrible what I'm saying, but it's true. It's what I've seen.
Unless you can continue to stay in business, you know, and survive an FDA audit. I mean, it can't be that bad to where the FDA comes in and shuts you down. You know, then there's no more studies for that site. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well.
Exactly.
Unfortunate that's the case, but sort of what I suspected, but I didn't think it was that bad, and that's why we wanted a CRA like yourself on to share some insights.
Yeah, it's just how it is. I mean, that site that I'm talking about, even we had like, they put the most senior of the senior monitors to go to that site because they were such a high enroller. And those monitors would come out and say, if the FDA came here today, they'd shut this site down. But the sponsor knows it, and they're giving them accolades and awards, and it's, yeah.
Do you think, now we're just purely speculating, okay? But do you think, because my gears are starting to turn, do you think that the doctor, not just patient recruitment, obviously they have to do that, maybe be a key opinion leader, but do you think that their prescribing patterns would also make the sponsor feel that way? Like, what if they're a really big prescriber on the sales side for one of the pharma's drugs? You know, do you think that has any bearing on this? Just speculation, but...
If I'm to speculate, I would think so, because to me, everything is about the bottom dollar, you know, in this industry. It really is. Like, with the pharma companies, it's just the truth. Like,
yeah,
no matter what, it is how it is. So if they see that, you know, that potential, I think it would be just that way.
Okay. Chris?
You have to remember that.
What'd you say, Chris? I didn't hear you.
I said we have to remember this is a business. That's the way they view it.
Yeah.
So if they're saving the sponsor, what'd you say, Dan, it costs $1 million a day usually to run a trial?
Yep, $1 million a day to get a trial.
So if a site's cutting off because they enroll so many patients that they're cutting off a month of the trial, hey, that's $30 million. That's noticeable.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well,
regardless of how horrible they are to work with.
Any last minute parting words of wisdom or advice from a CRA to the sites out there watching on what they can do to improve their chances of getting future studies? Let's say if they're not a high enroller, let's say they're an average enroller. What can they do to get in a good word from you for the next study?
Be organized, be easy to get to them, reach. If I, answer queries, data, just be responsive as a site, and that's all we can really ask for. We don't have to be best friends. Just just have the same data.
Yeah.
So be easy to work with.
Yeah, just be easy to work with. I'll be easy to work with. That's it. That's all really. You don't have to be the top enroller, of the study.
Well,
be responsive, get things taken care of.
That's right.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Brenda.
Exactly.
And thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Anything else you guys want to add?
Yes, thank you very much, Brenda.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening, everyone, to Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru, and for the ones on YouTube who joined the live stream. This has been recorded as well, so you'll be able to check it out in its entirety. Thank you very much, and we will talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.